Hello. Today I'm going to be going over my wooden, I call them Meepleships, but they're based on the Pirate CSG ships. So this is probably the biggest one that I will do because it's a 10-masted ship. And I'm hoping to do a few smaller ones, but they're pretty labor intensive. So I wanted to show a little bit of the process that goes into designing, building, and finishing off each one. So I start with Fusion 360, which is a 3D modeling computer aided drafting or CAD program. And I have a 3D model of the ship. Now, this is a finished ship. I've gone through and I've made all the design changes to it, and you can even see everything down to the magnets that hold it together. So I am able to take this 3D model and turn it into a 2D model. So all these pieces are now flat, and this is how they'll get cut out. And I can change it so that it automatically arranges all the different pieces together. So just a quick click of the button, you can see all these different pieces laid out together and set up to be able to be cut out. So I take all of this information and I move it over to the program that I use for my laser cutting. Now, some of the things that I have to go through and change because everything is being built with a magnet, I have to go in and tweak how all the masts are connected. So you can see these little tabs on the front help me locate where to put everything. I have to go in and put all the holes for each magnet, as well as making sure all the holes line up for the pieces to connect on the sides. So you can see they're all lined up and ready to go. So this helped me find several holes that wouldn't line up and make a few changes before I even cut it. So I'm not going to make a ton of changes, but if I wanted to go in and change one of these pieces, I can go in there and tweak exactly how it goes together. So like on this one, I noticed that the masts weren't quite wide enough, so I can go in and change how I put it together. So you can see it takes quite a bit of time to put something together, even though it looks pretty simple. It took several hours to get this all laid out the way that I wanted it to. So now the mast is wider and we don't have this little corner right here that'll tend to break. But it still hasn't applied it to the actual piece. So we have to go in and change some other pieces to be able to pull that change that I just made into it. So now it's added that extra material on, and you can see it in the 3D model. So I don't tend to make a lot of changes this way because then I have to go and re-import it into my final program, but this way you can see how it'll look when it's all put together. So once I get it copied over here, which is really just a lot of save, load sort of functions, I can go in and I can add all the extra art details, which is all these blue lines and the dice and extra features to the ship. So if I wanted to change the name of the ship, so instead of a Baoshuan, I can do a Guishuan. Just like that. So something like that's pretty easy to change. I could even make it something funny like the Telor ship. I might have to make one. That looks pretty cool. But for now, we're going to leave it the Baoshuan. And then I can also go in and make any other changes that I need to. So if I notice that something isn't quite cutting right, this is even applying tabs. So if I were to just cut this out of a sheet of material, all the pieces would just fall out. But it leaves these little tiny tabs on it to punch it out. Awful lot like an actual pirate's ship. But this one was right on top of one of the tabs that I needed. So I'm going to actually move it to some place that's a little bit better to manage. Just like that, it'll cut it in a different spot. Same with some of these that are in really tight spots. I want to move them to somewhere a little bit better. So this is the kind of tweaking that I have to do every time I make one of these. Is that something that doesn't work, I go in and tweak it just a little bit. It doesn't mean that it won't be able to be made. It can just make it a little bit easier to go together. I can also come in here, and if some of the slots are a little bit too tight, I can come in and change the height or the width of it just a tiny bit. So for this one, I can come in, put in a different value. You can't even see that value, but that is how tight some of these are, is that I can make a value you can't even see change, and it'll change completely how it fits. Thankfully, I don't have a lot of this kind of stuff to do for this one. So I have two sails here that these are the tiny back sails, and for this order the customer requested on some of these sails that I put in a dragon. So I can take this dragon that's on the front and I can try and place it on some of these other sails. So it's a little big for these back sails. But what I can do is I can try and put it on the main sail. So there's a lot of tools and capability in here that'll allow me to make these kind of changes very quickly and add quite a bit of detail to the ship. So it's a lot of work to go in and make any of these kind of changes, but it's a lot of fun. And I certainly won't sit here and make anyone watch the entire process, but you can get a pretty good idea of what goes into making it just like this. And in case you're wondering, the next video is going to be actually cutting this, so that'll be even better to watch. You can see all these changes that I've made and see how they affect the final product. So I won't go into too much detail with all that. But then when everything is done, I have a button that allows me to preview everything moving. So I can actually hit the play button and you can get an idea how it's going to go through and do this. So you can see at actual speed, this is how it's going to cut all the different little details, the lines that it puts on the masts, all the way up to speeding it up a little bit here, cutting out the entire thing. So it finishes all the details, and then it starts cutting out all the pieces. So you can see how it cuts everything out. Make sure you don't have any things that it's trying to cut after the piece has been cut out, or doing things in the wrong order. And every once in a while you find some weird things where it cuts something twice or something like that. It also gives me a good estimate on how long it takes to cut it, although there is setup time, and sometimes I have to come in and recut pieces if some of these break or the grain isn't right on the wood. And I'll definitely show more of that when I get to that portion. So anyway, I have lots of different tools that I can use to make tweaks and changes to it, and for the most part, it works pretty well. But it takes a lot. It's taken me quite a bit of practice to get there. So, like on, if you can see this change that we just made in the 3D model, now I can come in here and make it. Sometimes it's faster to do it in here than it is in the 3D model, and sometimes it's not. But in this case, I'm going to just make that change in here rather than try and change it in the 3D model and have to re-import it. Anyway, hope you enjoyed at least this little snapshot of what it takes to go in and make one of these, and see you next time.